Before using any machine in the shop, you should read and understand the owner's manuals. This tool here is our edge bander. It is a tool that is going to be used to help us install trim or thin pieces of veneer onto a sheet good. Now, the sheet good we're looking at today is plywood, and this bander is going to install this edging on our workpiece. It kind of gives it the appearance of being a solid piece of wood, and it's going to cover up our plywood layers so we don't see them. So right now the machine is still warming up. It gets up to about 350 degrees, and so while that's warming up, we're going to take a look at our board here and see that our board has a piece of edge banding already attached. Now this has been clipped nice and flush on the ends so that the next piece can go on there, or it could sit in a dado or rabbet for your project. We've routed off the top edge so it's nice and flush. There could be just a small ridge here, and that typically is just a little bit of glue left over that the router was not able to cut off. So we're going to look at how to use this machine to attach our edge banding and get everything trimmed up. This tool here is a tool that is created by Festool, and the name of the tool is called Conturo. The Conturo will put on the edge banding for us. Now, an edge bander like this is small and can get into some tight areas and do some radiuses where an edge banding machine, which would typically take up a large footprint in our shop, would not be able to do radiuses and curves very easily. So this is really a nice handy tool for some of those odd projects that we would do if we need to do radiuses or inside corners. This allows us to set that up easier. As part of the package deal here, we also have a router. This router is going to be used to flush trim off kind of the top edge of that edge banding. We have our trimmer here. This is going to be used to trim the ends or the excess material of the edge banding when we're done down here on the ends. There are some other accessories that come in the accessory pack with this as well. There's a little scraper that we could use. There's a tray to hold long pieces of edge banding if you have those. Now, our edge banding today is a little piece of solid lumber here, and we're going to attach this on. And so we want this to be somewhat the right length before we start. We don't want all this excess material hanging off here. So you can trim this a little bit longer than your workpiece or than your board, or you could just break it off a little bit longer. You don't have to have a nice tight cut because it's going to be trimmed off anyways. So I'm going to just break it off here. So if I look at our screen here, it's no longer blinking orange or red. That means that we're ready to go. It's gotten up to the right temperature. So we need to clamp this workpiece down before attaching it. So we're going to clamp it to the table so it doesn't move on us. When we put our clamps on, we want to make sure they're out of the way enough that the front of this machine, as we hold it, does not hit our clamps on the way by. We've got to make sure we have enough clearance so we clear those clamps, and that in the middle of our piece getting put on, we don't run into those. So we're ready to load our piece. There's a couple buttons on here. You would naturally think that the trigger is how you start this tool, but it's not. That's the speed adjustment. You can change the speed faster or slower while you're operating. We're going to be using this play button up on top. It's got a little play symbol in the center there, and that's the button we use to start. So I'm going to take my edge banding and line it up. I'm going to put it over here in this slot on the side of the machine. It goes right into this slot. Now, that might not be set for your thickness, and so you may have to do some adjusting. And that's with the knob up here on top. So if it's too loose or too tight, then you need to adjust that knob while you have your edge banding up here, and you'll feel if it's a good fit or not. If you have that slot too loose, what's going to happen when it puts on the edge banding, it might offset it so that you have plywood showing if you have it too loose, or if it's too tight, it might be sticking up too tall. So make sure that it's a good fit with your workpiece or your banding in that slot. When we're ready, I'm going to help push it in and push the play button on top, and it's going to indicate that it's ready to load. It's loaded correctly, so we see a little check mark in the indicator there. And now I'm going to take my tool and get it lined up. So as I put this on here, I got a little bit of a bend in my board there. I'm going to readjust my clamps so it's more supportive. So now that my clamps are adjusted, I'm ready to go. I'm going to be looking down here at the edge of the machine as I'm operating. And as it's coming out, the edge bending is going to start feeding out. And I am going to need to push this tight to the board as it's coming out. So let's start this and take a look. So our edge banding is installed. While we're letting the glue cool down a little bit, let's talk about the machine a little bit more. One nice thing about this machine is it's well balanced with this lip on the front. So if I'm up here working on my workpiece, I can hold that machine with one hand. So once I've started it, if I've got a little spot of edge banding that needs some attention, I could push on that while the machine is still going and I'm controlling it. So really nice design there that I can put my hand up on that front handle and support the whole machine. Now that we're done running our piece, I'm going to go ahead and turn the machine off, and I just hold the power button and it's going to just shut off. We can unplug it and get it out of the way. So our glue is cooled a little bit. It's no longer sticky to the touch. So I'm going to take my trimmer here, and it just sits on the edge of the board. My edge banding feeds through the little slot there, and I'm going to squeeze it, and it should clip off my excess edge banding nice and flush with the board. And we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. And it's trimmed those off nice and even. So all that's left now is a little bit of a lip on top and bottom that we need to take care of. And we want our edge banding to be wider than our workpiece, because we wouldn't want any of the plywood layer showing when we're done. So we want it to be big, and then we're going to come in with our router and trim that off. All right, so we're set up and ready to go with our router. We're going to operate this just like our normal router. It just has a longer base on here so that we can more keep it flat on the surface. And it also has a little step underneath so we can sit on top of that ledge and make our cut. So now that I've got that all set up, I'm ready to turn on the router. My bit is pulled away so it doesn't engage the workpiece when I turn the machine on. And then I'm going to just bring it into the workpiece and slowly feed it down the board. All right, I'm done with that side. I'm going to take the router and put it towards the center of the table so it doesn't fall off. Now we are left with a little bead of glue right up here on the ridge of the board. That should scrape off pretty easy. I like to take a little utility knife blade and kind of cut that glue off. You could also sand it, but I find that it tends to heat up and transfer to my sandpaper. So I like to just scrape it off prior to taking it to any sander. But ultimately we'll end up sanding this. The nice thick piece of edge banding allows you some room to sand that before we would start to see the glue that's holding it on. So we're going to flip the board over and do the other side. All right, we flipped the board over. Now we're going to cut this lip off just like we did the other side. Have the bit not touching the workpiece so it can get to full speed. Now with this little piece of wood, it really doesn't seem to matter which direction we're going, if we go clockwise or counterclockwise, but typically we want to feed it against the rotation of the blade. So whatever that might be on your machine, whatever's cutting and not dragging you along with the cutter as it's moving. Again, we have that little lip of glue on here that needs to be taken care of, and then we would be done at this point. You would need to determine if you just want one edge. Maybe you're only going to have one edge showing, and so that's all you need to do. Maybe this is a shelf that's going to be moved in and out of a project, and maybe you need to do all four sides. And so when you do that, I would just orientate your board so maybe your end grain is done first, and then when you come with the grain, that's going to cover up the little seam. So your end grain is going to have a little seam on the end that you would see or would be noticeable. So if you have any questions with this tool or any other tools in the shop, please talk to your instructor so we can get those questions answered for you. We want you to feel safe and comfortable using the machines and go home safe every night after class.